Hey y'all, and welcome back to another video of My Creative Life with Kel Sweetie, where we read books, we make art, and essentially do whatever our creative hearts desire. Today, we are going over my weird July wrap-up and my weird August TBR. Today's video may be a short one. Don't quote me on that, because we all know I don't know how to edit at all down a video, and I'm a yapper. But July was weird. I only got through 4 books. How many books did I read? I only got through 4 books, and I didn't finish my 5th that I wanted to finish before we had this video. Time wasn't on my side, and I needed to get this video done. So we'll talk a bit about that, and I have only one actual book on my August TBR and a couple of hopefuls that I'm not fully committed to, but because it is Women in Translation Month, I have especially to be riding around the car. So they're hopefuls, but they're technically very much my TBR because, as we know, I do not have all the time in the world to read a physical, and this month's TBR has one book on it that you have to read physically. So let's get into intro and stuff, and let's get to it. So July was a weird one. It was it was definitely a weird month. I participated in Gabby Reed's summerween challenge at the beginning of the month, and honestly, that's when I got the most amount of my reading done. I just was really busy with a lot of different things this month, and it slowed down my reading. Never mind the fact that 2 books I read almost put me in a slump, and it was definitely the reason why I was slowing down with my reading. So July was so weird. I started off the month reading You're Not Supposed to Die Tonight. Something I was so excited to read, mainly because, well, many different things. The cover was great. The wonderful cover. The main character was a person of color. She was queer. It was supposed to be a fun summer slasher, summer camp type of thing. And it really fell short for me. I'd heard a lot of people also liked it during my I Love Black Horror reading challenge in February. So I was really excited to read this one. If you don't know, You're Not Supposed to Die Tonight essentially has to do with our main character, Charity. She is working at a slasher summer camp simulation park type of thing. So essentially they've bought a summer camp that may or may not have this lore that killings happen. It's not even lore. It's down in it's actual news that these killings happened at this summer camp. And they reenact something that's very akin to Friday the 13th type of situation. Her and some other kids are working up there. She's basically in charge. She has a horrible home life, blah, 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 blah. Her role is that she always plays the final girl in these simulations. That's her deal. And all of a sudden, some kids go missing, and they go, oh, well, they were jerks for just leaving like that. Okay. Some other weird stuff starts happening. They start reasoning it away. And then all of a sudden, they finally, like, it's probably 60% of the book when they finally come to terms with the fact that somebody's killing them. Cults are involved. Weird story plots are involved. I described this at one point as, like, a bad Scooby-Doo trope, where basically, like, you know how at the end, they, like, capture the ghost or the monster or whatever, and they pull the mask off of them, and they're like, Sheriff Wilkinson, and then they like pull it off again, and they're like, actually, was it Velma? Like, not Velma. What is it? Yeah, Velma. It's like, no, actually, it wasn't him. It was, and they pull another mask off, and it's somebody else. It got into that territory near the end, where they threw everything but the kitchen sink at trying to keep you guessing on who the villain was, but not even in a way that was clever. It felt literally like that. It really. I always say that, like, just because it's a YA novel does not mean that you need to dumb down the story or that the plot doesn't need to be strong. Plenty of YA novels and books that were meant for young adults and like even middle grade are books that are read by adults and are loved. Like, you don't need to dumb things down in order for adults to be able to read it, and you don't need to dumb things down if you're making things for younger kids. So I don't even find that as an excuse that this is a YA horror thriller type of situation, but the plot was just everywhere. The main character started to kind of grate on me because she kept on saying, "I'm the final girl," when she was talking about her own life. And it kind of became a mantra of hers, but in a way that didn't feel inspiring. It just felt annoying. Like, 'cause she was using it for things that didn't even make sense. Like, oh, I'm the final girl, that's why I have to survive us being actually killed and hunted out here in the woods. I'm the final girl, so that's why I have to be the one to kill this person. I'm the final girl, so you're not the actual final girl though. Like, you're only the final girl in this reenactment of some sort. I also kind of figured out who the killer was by the end, or before the end, because it's kind of the only thing that made sense. There's a connection of, like, who knows who. It didn't really make a lot of sense, to be honest with you. And the ending told itself. Like, there's supposed to be one last jump ending at the end, and it already told you what it was going to be, which made you roll your eyes at it instead of you kind of getting a jump scare at the end, because it had told you already what it was going to be. There were people who died who I felt like, that didn't make sense, and you just hacked them off. Like, that doesn't make any sense. I don't know. I'm frustrated with it because I feel like I'm just disappointed because of how much I expected out of this book. And after hearing such really great things, I was expecting to at least get 3-star territory with this book. And overall, I think it ended up being 2 stars. And one of those stars definitely, I feel like, was mainly because of just the diversity in the characters rather than the actual plot. The more that I talk about it, sometimes I lean towards a 1.5 territory. But the only reason I think also that I did not score this lower is because of the next book I read that was so much worse. And that was Home is Where the Bodies Are by Geneva Rose. Again, so many people picked up this book because of its amazing cover. Do I still have it? Where do I have it? I picked up the Barnes & Noble exclusive because it's ingenious. When you want to do, Barnes & Noble does exclusives all the time, and sometimes it's just, oh, we have a special Q&A in the back. Okay, I want covers. If it's an exclusive, I want an exclusive cover. And this was amazing. The original cover looks like this. It's this VSH. Yes, that's how you say it. VHS. Jesus, I grew up in the 90s, I swear, y'all. VHS cassette tape, which we all know is really in style right now. Like, I love it as much as the next person. It's the nostalgia, the millennia, I get it. But everyone loved it. I loved it. A lot of people picked it up because of this cover. I picked it up even more because the Barnes & Noble exclusive came with a slipcover that the VHS slides into. Amazing? Yes, I know. This is just great. This is called great packaging. Oh, and the sticker, that can come off of it, by the way. We love that. It was amazing packaging. Actually, even after I finished this book, I considered keeping it. It will get unhauled at the beginning of next year. That's when I will unhaul my books and everything all at once. But I considered keeping it just because this cover was amazing. Research, what have you. But I hated this book so much that couldn't even save it. The main plot of this book is that, what are our main characters' names? I don't even know anymore. There's Beth, Nicole, and Michael. Yes. They just lost their mother. The beginning of it, trigger warning, because there's no trigger to this. Like, you've lost your mother, but, like, this feels like something that should be said at the beginning of the book. You are there to see Beth see her mother die. Her mother has been sick for a very long time. She's been living at home with hospice care, and Beth has been helping taking care of her, and her mother finally ends up passing. You are there for all of it. It is in deep detail. As somebody who just recently, about a year and a half to 2 years ago lost their grandmother to that sort of experience. It was a little rough for me to hear about it. To be honest, I did have to take a breather after the scene, and it's one of the first scenes in the book. So, heads up in regards to that, if you're sensitive to that, or, you know, it may be shocking for you. I know it kind of was a lot to kind of experience right out the gate for me, but that happens. Nicole and Michael come home. Nicole is a recovering drug addict. Michael is supposedly some successful guy out in LA or whatever. They all come home. All three of them are different, but all three of them have something in common. They all suck. They're all three not really great people or characters or really that interesting, to be honest. And they find a VHS cassette tape while they're cleaning out their mother's home that implicates their parents in a murder. They basically are trying to put together what the heck happened, who their parents were, and as time goes on, they start finding out there were more bodies. And that's essentially the book, where they're basically just trying to figure all this out, as well as deal with their crap being three siblings who honestly don't too much care for each other. Which, why would they care for each other? They all suck as people. I'm gonna tell you, Beth was annoying. She was so depressing as a person. It just was like, girl, stand up. Stand up for yourself. She's the oldest, and she's just like, well, I stayed here, and I took care of mom, and I did, and it's like, you decided to do that. And you decided to be depressed. And throw your life away at like 17 and get pregnant and married to somebody and whatever the case, like, girl, like, just stand up for yourself. Quit blaming everybody else for the fact that you hate your life. Then there was Nicole. Nicole is probably the most reasonable character, and that's insane considering she's the one who Geneva Rose is like trying to tell you is like she's a recovering addict. Now here's the thing. I feel like Rose did her research by watching Lifetime movies. Because the way that she wrote Nicole, I felt like this was a perfect opportunity to talk about how easy it is to become an addict to opioids, especially in these small towns. Growing up and coming out of Dayton, Ohio, which is one of the main cities that has dealt with the opioid crisis because of its location, I can tell you for a fact that I've seen how that affects these small towns and how easy it is because of the fact that these like hospitals are not giving any sort of real opioid training when they're giving it to you, when these drugs are highly addictive, when you are in an accident or need pain medication. Nobody is monitoring you on your usage. They're giving you far too much in the first place to not be monitoring you. And so, of course, we've heard, at this point, you should have heard so many people who you would have never thought getting hooked on opioids because of how addicted they are and how nobody is taking care of the people who are getting addicted to them when they're being given to them directly by the hospitals. You get into, you know, a car accident, you have a sports injury, you hear about these women who are dealing with it, and these communities are not being taken care of because nobody thought that they would ever have to take care of these communities who are getting addicted to them, which are rich white communities or well-off white communities. So they're not prepared for it. Point is that no, we did not go into that socio-political conversation, which I think would have been a great thing that would have leveled up this thriller into something more than just Lonely Housewife paperback, Colleen Hoover type of area. Now, I've heard that Geneva Rose, that's kind of what she writes. She writes very Colleen Hoover-esque thriller type of things. You pick it up at Target, you read it just to, like, feel something. Thing is I didn't feel anything in this book. It wasn't even spicy. There wasn't even spice scenes. There wasn't even real drama. Like, my thing is that even if it's a popcorn thriller, then still give me something to be, like, chewing at the bit for. This book didn't give that. And when you found out who the killer was at the end, I had figured it out. I had done a vlog, and I figured out who the killer was 30% into the audiobook. Like, on the dot. I had said, I'm 30% in, this is what's happening, I think it's this person. And sure enough, I was correct. The only twist that I didn't get was one of those twists where you could have never gotten it because you didn't have enough information about it. Like, it was something like, I don't want to ruin it for somebody who decides to read it, but it was something where it was just like, here's a twist, but how could you ever gotten to that point about that person if you weren't given enough information? So it's not really a twist, you just gave us information. you know? So, yeah, I was just so disappointed. Personally, if you have watched any Forensic Files, if you have read more than a couple of thrillers, if you've ever read about sociopaths or psychopaths, you are going to figure out who the killer is quite quickly. It will not be a twist to you. You will not be like, oh my god, I can't believe it was that person. I promise you, you will figure it out. And for a minute, I thought it was just me. And then I posted my review about it online. And I had a ton of people who said, thank you for saying that, because so many people were saying this was a great book. And I thought that I was just crazy, so I was keeping it to myself. No. If you are out there, you are not alone. So that I gave a 1.5 star. I nearly wanted to give it a 1, but I barely give 1s. I think 1 has to be like, I somehow read this and didn't DNF it, but I definitely should have, because it insulted me, and I feel like the author is racist, homophobic, misogynistic, something along those lines. Like, that's what 1 territory would be for me. This, I don't feel like Geneva Rose necessarily was insulting me personally and my identity, but she did write a crappy book. So she got a 1.5. And I feel like You're Not Supposed to Die Tonight was only a step up, barely, from that. And so that one got a 2. That was the start of my July. And I was down for the count. I did not want to read another book. And then I read S.A. Cosby's All the Sinners Bleed. And it felt like, okay, for those 2 that really sucked, let me give you a 5 star. Let me give you a strong 5 star. I cried multiple times. I teared up multiple times while reading this book. I have never really had a big, want to read S.A. Cosby's work, mainly because I'm not a huge mystery crime, true crime type of reader. I'm all for the fun plots. Give me fun plots. We like to have fun. And S.A. Cosby did not seem fun, but after finding it at my local thrift store, really cheap, basically brand new, I was like, okay, let me pick this up. And it fit perfectly for the summerween challenge, so I ended up reading it. Best decision I've ever made. Again, coming from a small Midwestern town that is located in the Bible Belt, this book uncovered things that I never really thought that I needed conversation around, or that I ever really had the words to talk about. And it's one of those things that you can't really explain to people who've never grown up in that sort of area, who've never grown up in a small town, a Christian dominant town, a Midwestern or Southern town. Coming from Dayton, that is only an hour, if that, drive from Kentucky, coming from a family that is originally from Kentucky and migrated to Ohio. There are times when Ohio, especially the southern portions, feel just like that Middle South type of area because of how close we are and how many people have migrated to that area. So it really just feels like connection to it. And the conversations that were happening, the politics that were in this book. Many times I've talked to my mom and other people I've talked to from the Midwest have had conversations where we've stated people from the Midwest are some of the sweetest, meanest people you've ever met. And what we mean by that is they will sit here, insist on cooking you a dinner, tell you, talk to you and make you feel at home, smile, give you the strongest hugs in the world, and absolutely mean it until you piss them off, or until you insult them, or until you hurt them, and then they're coming for blood. And they will not hold back. And that is this book. That dichotomy. If you don't know, I feel like I can't even explain the entire book, because that would then give far too much away, and this is one of those books where you just need surface level information. The main character, Titus, is a ex-FBI agent who is now a sheriff in his hometown. He's the first Black sheriff ever. We are coming up on what they call the Fall Fest of their area, and the good old boys of their area want to do a parade of some sort to save their Confederate statue, or whatever the case is. Before that all happens, it's about a week or 2 before that event occurs, and tension already high around that, a school shooting happens. And it is a Black kid who commits the school shooting and ends up killing a teacher. That is essentially what you need to know, because what happens from there is an unraveling of a dark, dark evil that's been happening inside of the town from that that is revealed from that shooting. That is literally all I can tell you. If I go any further than that, I am now giving you too much information. Titus gets involved in it in trying to find the information to crack open the case that has been happening in this town. And therein lies the true crime mystery that's happening. This, in comparison to Home is Where the Bodies Are Buried, night and day. Night and day. And I get it. This is not a popcorn thriller whatsoever. This is very hard. It's talking about a lot of heavy topics. I've even said that it's akin to even maybe extreme horror. Not in the fact of, I think those who read extreme horror may go, okay, you took it a bit too far. But I do feel like it feels that way because it does get descriptive with some of the horrors that happen and the crimes that are committed. And they're hard to listen to. Sometimes I listened to the audiobook, which was an amazing experience. And it's not easy light reading. They don't gloss over some of the crimes and indiscretions and stuff that happen in this book. They talk about it. And it's rough to listen to. I think the conversations surrounding Christianity and like blind fellowship was one that was really insane to listen to. The idea of indoctrinated racism coming from a town that is inherently racist in its everyday traditions and routines, and that you have grown up in that space for so long that you don't even recognize it necessarily as racism, just how society works when it does not work like that outside of other communities, was something that was very, very insane to kind of listen to. Because you're kind of starting to go like, whoa, that felt close to home. I recognize that. I've never heard somebody talk about it. And I just feel like if you are from that sort of demographic or area, I do really recommend this book because I feel like it will talk about some things that most of us don't have the language to talk about, especially with others who maybe understand the experience. Because those who have never had that experience, who've never grown up in that space, will never really understand it because it sounds insane to them. It doesn't sound like, why would you want that? Why would you do that? Or whatever. And I think that it's also a very important book to read because of the nuances of racism in those areas, especially as we're in an election year and people go, how could you possibly hate somebody? How could you possibly... The thing is that a lot of these people don't view their views as them outright hating somebody. It's instead, they view it as protecting their space, protecting their ancestry, protecting their livelihood, and not looking at it from the space of, and in doing so, I am therefore enacting hatred upon you. I recommend this book all day, every day. It is a 5-star for me, and it's not an easy read. But I highly, highly recommend it if you are, trigger warnings all day, every day. There's sexual abuse, there's molestation, there's kidnapping, all of this is surrounding kids. This is all happening to children. These triggers that I'm telling you. It's a lot. So don't pick it up lightly, but if you do feel like you have the mindset to do so, I highly, highly recommend it. That 5-star pushed me through July to go, okay, I can pick up another book. And if the world said, well, too bad, we're going to give you another mid-book, and that was Ready Player 2. Last year, I fell in love with Ready Player 1. I've loved the movie. I really much love the movie. And so I thought, let me read the book. I read the book. The movie only took like maybe, I want to say 40% of the plot line of the book. And when I got through to the end of Ready Player 1, I was still sitting there. I hadn't realized that, and I kind of felt like, oh, they must have taken both Ready Player 2 and Ready Player 1 and combined it into the movie. So, because I'm not a series reader, y'all know that. I'm not picking up a lot of series, but this caused me to pick up Ready Player 2 because I'm like, oh, let me read like the rest of it. Let me get more information. That's not the case at all. This is a whole different plot and everything that happens after they've won the contest entirely. What they wrote in the movie, they went off script completely from the book. So just keep that in mind if you decide to pick up this series, that only maybe 40% of the first book is really included in the movie, and it's not even as dark. Like, I love that about Ready Player One, is that it felt very real and it felt dark and it wasn't shiny. The movie is very shiny compared to the book. The second book, Ready Player Two, the character development, it's almost like Klein just said, no, we don't need to develop those characters anymore. The plot development, where is she? Because she's not in the room with us. All of a sudden, they spent 20% of the book talking of building out the world that we spent so much time already learning about in Ready Player One. And this book isn't marketed as a standalone. Like, I don't recommend for you to, I mean, I don't really recommend you to read the book, to be honest, but I don't recommend, if you want to start these books, I don't recommend you start with Ready Player Two. You need to read Ready Player One to understand anything that's happening in Ready Player Two and understand these characters. So it felt useless for us to use 20% of the book, nearly, to talk about rebuild the world that we just built, and also do it very haphazardly. Like, it felt very surface level, considering we had spent so much time in it in Ready Player One. Then the characters who won the grand prize, which, if you don't know, Ready Player One basically has, it takes place in an alternate universe, video game type of universe, AI, essentially. And this person who invented this other world, essentially he's passed and he's created this great treasure hunt for somebody to win, be his heir. Okay, his whole thing is nostalgia around the 80s. That is essentially the entire book, is that this group of ragtag characters end up trying to find and Halliday's heir, be the Halliday's heir from this information about his life and nostalgia of the 80s. And if you play video games and watch these movies and these mention these books and stuff like that, and it's a fun time. It's extremely fun. It is still dark because the government is, of course, involved, and money-hungry corporations are involved, and they're willing to kill people in order to keep people from moving up and getting this money, because it's in this dystopian future where everybody's poor and is living horribly, and that's why they're all in this alternate universe playing these video games, because real life sucks. The book itself is amazing. They hate these corporations, these money-hungry corporations. That was the entire point of the first book. You get to the second book, and basically these characters that you, like, not necessarily super likable, but you liked them, which made them dynamic, turn right into those money-hungry corporations that you spend the first book hating. They end up paying for clues. They end up throwing money around like it's nobody's business for their personal lives, regardless of them donating hand over fist money. They're not present for those things. They're not actually doing any of it. So you're sitting there, you're like, so you turned into the exact thing that you hated, and we're not going to address it? I think the thing, I ended up giving this book, I think, a 2.5. No, I ended up giving it a 2. I'm remembering it now. I gave it a straight up 2 because it wasn't that great of a book. And what even got it to the 2 status was when they were in the afterworld, which is Prince's world in this video game AI experience. And I'm forgetting what the world is called right now. Okay, wait a second. Let me read it real quick. Oasis. The Oasis. And it's Prince's world, and as a Prince fan, it was a lot of fun to read about them going through the afterworld and finding these different clues and things that I just remember from the songs and the movies that Prince made, and even mentioned that he had created a video game. What I did love, and even at the end when they end up fighting these 7 iterations of Prince with the time, it was a lot of fun. And what I also loved is that H, who is their, she's a black queer character. She mentions that she loves Prince, but that considering Prince later on in his life became Jehovah's Witness and became he completely shunned that community, the gay community, because he was just like, well, God thinks that you're a sin, so therefore I think you're a sin, or what you're doing is sinful. And she mentions how hurtful that is because of a good amount of Prince's career, especially during his most recognizable eras, were spaces that queer people had solace in. He was making lyrics about being in this in-between of sexuality and being in this freedom of sexuality wearing makeup and not, you know, it being an issue or anything, but being considered cool. You still being like sexually like free and picking up women who are amazing and beautiful, and still riding that line of just simply freedom of identity. And that's one of the things that I even love about Prince's music, Prince's career, Prince's art over his time. But as well, she sits there and she goes, so a lot of people felt like they were completely neglected. They were told that they weren't what they were supposed to be when he spent so much of his career before then telling them they were exactly how they should be. And it was hurtful. And I think that that was an amazing moment to sit there, because of the whole point of these books being nostalgia, and especially nostalgia of the 80s, which, as we know, there's so much that was problematic about the 80s. Was it fun? Absolutely. There's a reason why we still watch those movies and listens to that music, and still it circulates in fashion every couple of years or so. It's because it was so much fun and it was so creative and it was so free. But at the same time, it was also the height of capitalism, and racism was hitting its precipice, and misogyny was left and right, and it was all being covered by this idea that this glossiness that we were all having fun. But that was the 80s. And it was talking about throughout the entire book, because they also go to a world for John Hughes movies. As we all know, John Hughes is known for having some very like problematic movies and issues in his films as well, even though they're the epitome of the 80s and they're so much fun. And it was great to hear them talk about replacing Ducky in Pretty in Pink, which is one of my top John Hughes films, even though Ducky was a problem and everything. And also finding out that Robert Downey Jr. was supposed to be the original Ducky, as requested by Molly Ringwald, because of their chemistry. That in the end, Molly Ringwald's character was supposed to end up with Ducky and not the rich guy, but the test audiences didn't like that, and so John Hughes had to rewrite it all. And even being a fan of those movies and then hearing all the Easter eggs throughout their time in that world, from 16 Candles, Weird Science, and The Breakfast Club, stuff like that, Ferris Bueller's Day Off. Like, this is the epitome of the 80s. Again, so much fun. But even in that story as well, they also talk about the issues and point out the problematic, like, of, you know, those movies as well, openly. And I think that the whole point of this book was to talk about how blind love of our nostalgic references and things that we love is an issue. That both can happen. You can enjoy 16 Candles and still vehemently talk about how racist it is. Still talk about there's something about this that's nostalgic. There's something about this that's just fun, and it's nice to not think for a moment. But then when the movie is off, you can sit there and go, yes. Would I ever greenlight it? Absolutely not, because of a character like Long Duk Dong, or the misogyny of even Jake Ryan and like the character. You know, there's plenty of things to talk about during that movie. There's plenty of things to talk about in other movies and everything by John Hughes. There's plenty of things to talk about in regards to Prince and his stance and everything. And I thought that that was insightful. I thought that that was a great conversation, especially as somebody who's a pop culture fanatic, but also highly like into politics and societal issues. However, the problem is that because the plot and the character development sucked so bad, a very insightful conversation like that, we couldn't even get to it. It couldn't even be something. I noticed it because of me always looking for the plot and the meaning. But you couldn't get to that very easily because the plot sucked. The characters sucked. Nothing made sense. I gave it a 2, and really the only reason I gave it that 2 is because going through the John Hughes and Prince worlds were so much fun for me as fan of both of those artists' art, as well as me digging deep and finding that conversation and going, that's something to tear apart and talk more about and investigate, not through this book, but on my own. That was my last actual like finished read of July. The one that I'm working on right now, and I was hoping that I could finish before I did this video, was Gone Girl, which has been very interesting and more interesting than I thought it would be to read. I've not watched the movie in a very long time, so it's kind of like I'm reading this fresh, but I am enjoying myself. I mean, both of these people suck as people. Amy sucks as a person, but also, what's the man's name? See, I don't even remember the man's name because he's the husband. Nick. He sucked. He still sucks. He sucks as a person. She sucks as a person. He sucks as a person. Everybody sucks as a person. But it's enjoyable. And this is a great example of I don't need to like you for me to enjoy this book. Geneva Rose needs to take a note out of that. I haven't finished it yet, so it is going to be in my next wrap-up video. But I am enjoying myself. It's feeling like maybe 4 territory right now. Definitely maybe 4 territory. Let's get into some of my very short TBR and hopefuls for August. I have one actual book on my TBR. And it's because it's not that like I honestly, being honest with myself, I'm only going to read that book because it is a physical read. And the idea that like I'm only going to I'm not going to read anything. I listen to books all the time. Me sitting here and saying, I'm only going to read this book, that doesn't make any sense. It's not going to happen. But as far as like, okay, this is my goal. I really want to finish this book by the end of the month. This is the only book that I really am like, I want and need to finish this book by the end of the month before I go into September because I've been meaning to. And it's a buddy read with Elli from Your Spooky Mom on Instagram, which is so exciting because she's never read it. And I have been wanting to reread this since I became obsessed with it in college. And that is House of Leaves. House of Leaves. Let me pull it up. Let me get it up. This wonderful book by Mark Z. Danielewski. I am so excited to pick this book back up again. In college, I had an almost awakening to read again, and it was because of a class I took about unusual books or books that have, I actually don't remember the name of the class, but they had us read some amazing books in that class. And one of them was House of Leaves. And we were only supposed to read like a snippet. Like it's supposed to be about basically this much. And I got so obsessed with the book. I read the entire thing, which was a lot for me during college because it was a physical read. I was in college and doing book, running around all over the place. The fact that I found the time to actually pick this up and actually read it, and not just read it, but look at all the notes and the clues and go on the message boards to find out like there are like 3 books in this book. It has a life. It's scary because it has a soul inside of this book. And you can ask anybody who loves this book, they will probably tell you something similar. That reading this book always makes you feel like somebody's behind you. It's creepy. And it's amazing for that because when you dig into this book, you start to become the person who is in the book becoming obsessed. It's hard to explain what this book is about though, because it has like 3 books inside of it. And because all of it, you can't believe anything about this. It's unreliable narrator at its finest. Danielewski is an unreliable narrator. Zappano, who apparently wrote the book that the book inside of this is about, which is about a family that buys a house. The Nevadisons, the Nevadison record. Zappano writes the Nevadison record, which is about the family that buys a house that seems to keep growing. And how it starts to take over their lives. It starts to like kill them. Like there's it's very, what's that book about the person who like it's like a Roman book, a Roman story that's like it's about a house that has a labyrinth in it and they're hearing voices in the labyrinth, so they don't know if they're the only one in the labyrinth or if it's their brain going crazy. I'm gonna pop it up on the caption below. But there's issues of that going on. Footnotes that aren't real, that are saying that they're real information, but it's to hide something else, and it's a deeper dive into something else going on in the book. Our main character, main character who finds Zappano's records, Johnny Truant. Yeah, this is Johnny Truant. He's like a whole thing, and he has some issues. It takes place during the early 2000s, so there's this grittiness to it as well. And Johnny is dealing with his own past. of his mother who wasn't great and wasn't all there, and there's notes to Johnny, so you have to wonder if Johnny is Stefano, is Johnny writing this book or Johnny finding this book, because Johnny starts living in this house that Stefano was living in after he died. It's a lot. He starts to lose his mind. Like, people are losing their minds as they're in here. And because of all the work that you're doing, that Johnny's also doing as he's reading the Nevadason record, you start to wonder if you're losing your mind because you're doing some of the same things he's doing. It's amazing. If you love puzzles, like you're one of those people who's like, I love the crossword or Sudoku or whatever, and you're not pressed for time, I really recommend. It's my favorite book of all time, and I haven't read it since college, and so I really want to pick it up again to see if it holds up, because I've been recommending this book like crazy to people. Whenever anybody goes, what's your favorite book of all time? House of Leaves. Every single time I tell them House of Leaves. I love other books, but this book changed my brain chemistry. Like, literally changed my brain chemistry. I absolutely loved it. This is what I'll be reading. Pages like that. There's parts of it that are in, like, text. There's pages that look like this. There's pages that have nothing on them. Yep, there's pages like that. There's pieces like this where it's like, okay, I've got to read that in a mirror in order to get what it's saying. Like, what's in these boxes? Does it even matter? And that's another thing, too, is that some of the things and clues that you find in here, you find out, no, they're not real. Okay, why? No reason. And then you start to lose it because you're like, there's got to be a reason. Why would there not be a reason? Why would you lie? As an author, why would you lie? It's so, so, so great. I've been very much, like, obsessed with this book ever since I read it back in college. And I've told so many people, like, even this is the letter that is hidden in these letters from Johnny's very, very disturbed mother. It's just amazing. And I plan to read it this month. Now, it is now August 4th. I gotta pick up this book and start moving. I think the only way that I'm gonna make it through this is if I dedicate every night 30 minutes of reading time before I go to bed or something along those lines, or else there's no way that I will be like, okay, I'm picking up this book and reading it, because I'm just constantly working through stuff. It's the reason why I don't read physically very often. So I already recognize that. Me and Ellie have to get a schedule going to make sure that we're staying on track to finish it by the end of the month. But I am super excited to read this book. And this is my main and only book for my August TBR, because this is the only book that I really have a goal to finish reading. Everything else are hopefuls. They're all like, okay, it's Women in Translation Month, and we, of course, want to recognize that. So, let's get into maybe some of those hopefuls real quick. One of them I already have on my Libby, and that is Woodworm by Layla Martinez. So, Woodworm, I'm not a huge, like, big person on what it's about, but the way that it was pitched to me and what really made me want to read it is that it has to do with a girl and her grandmother. They're in this house that's essentially trying to kill them, and it's because of some curse that her father has put either on the house or something he did cause the house to get cursed. That was enough for me to pick up the book. It's not that long of a book, and that's interesting for me, and the cover is amazing, and so I thought, yeah, I'll pick that up for an audio. So that's one of my first hopefuls. I even already have it on Libby, so after I finish Gone Girl, I'm going to go into that book as far as one of my audios is concerned. Another hopeful that I have, I kind of shopped around my physical TBR bookshelf, which is going to have to get rearranged soon because it was free book day apparently at my new position at Penguin Random House, and apparently they have a day where you can get free books and you can get up to 10, and of course I got 10. So why would I get less than that? But neither here nor there. But after shopping this, I found two other hopefuls as well. One of those was Fever Dream by Samantha Schweblin. I found this at the thrift store, and I'd heard a lot of great stuff about it, so I ended up picking it up. I've read Samantha Schweblin's Little Eyes, and I didn't too much care for it. I think it was the writing style, not necessarily what was going on in it, because essentially it was about, like, you know, conveyorship and observation through these, like, little Furby characters and stuff. But it wasn't, something about it just wasn't messed up enough for me. A lot of people said it was really messed up, and I don't know. Reading it, I didn't get that. And I think maybe it was even the end. The end just wasn't strong enough for me to kind of really recognize it as something that I enjoyed reading. But I want to try it again because a lot of people have said this is their favorite Samantha Schweblin, so I thought, why not give it a try? It's short anyways, and so I'm not too concerned with the length. So, Samantha Schweblin's Fever Dream. And then also Sayaka Murata's Life Ceremony Stories. Another one that I found at a thrift store. Thought I would pick it up. Again, this is the author Convenience Store Woman, which I read and enjoyed the plot, enjoyed what it meant, enjoyed even the character, but again, the ending didn't do it for me, and I think it was a writing situation and translation. I've tried many times to read translated novels, and sometimes there's sometimes a miss for me. More times than not, there are a lot of misses for me. Those are my 3 hopefuls for this month. I am concerned though, because I do have a lot of trouble with translated novels. I feel like there's a big art in translating tone and everything from another language into another language, especially if there aren't, like, words that relate closely to another word. And I think that that's why sometimes a lot of people have issues with translated novels and whether or not they're very good, like whether or not they're enjoyable for other people across cultures, because you can't sometimes get the same experience. I don't have a lot of luck with translated novels, and it's also why I've not really committed as much to the bit as I usually am with monthly celebrations. But I still really do want to read translated novels, especially Spanish language translated novels. So I want to see if, you know, trying my luck with Fever Dream as well as Woodworm, and maybe I just need to hear about more Spanish language translated novels, and that might really get me into it. But in the meantime, I do have Life Ceremony. It is on my physical TBR, and this seems like a great time to still read it. So we will see. But main goal, this baby. That's my main goal this month. We will see by the end of this month if I get through it, though. And y'all are like, Kelsey, you've read books that thick before. This is not a visual. This is a visual read that has, like, picture this 3 books bigger, because that's how much information I'm gonna have to, like, read through and look into in order to get immersed in this book. And that's the whole point. I'm so excited and scared. Well, that's it for today's video, y'all. Like I said, there's gonna be a lot of editing that's gonna have to happen with this one, and we will see if I would love to get this in the 40-minute mark. We will see if I get it in the 40-minute mark, especially with how much I had to say about Ready Player 2 and the Genevan Bros book. Both were so upsetting, as well as my love for House of Leaves just being overwhelmingly amazing. So there will have to be a lot of editing probably in those portions, but I am aiming for a 40-minute mark. Editing Kelsey, tell me down below if we made it. If you did make it to the end of this video, we have now started this new tradition because of the joke of how long my videos usually are. Instead of an emoji, put down what your favorite book of all time is. Since I spent so much time talking about mine, put down your favorite book of all time. I would love to know, just for some future TBR, because the TBR is always growing. Thank y'all so much for watching. I expect a book haul video coming soon, as I mentioned, because I've gotten 10 new books, and I think I've also gotten an ARC, which I'm happy to also share. So I thought it'd be good to maybe do a book haul video to have some in between all of the Halloween content that's been coming out recently on this channel. It's August, y'all. It's not slowing down. It's not slowing down probably till November. So just buckle in for it. I swear there will be book content coming on here, but the Halloween's not going anywhere and the holiday content is ramping up. So I will see you on the next one. Please subscribe down below if you enjoyed today's video. As I mentioned, more book content will be coming, but if you do like Halloween content, that will be here as well. And give me a like if you like today's video. I will see you on the next one. Bye.